On this edition of Sightings, was Thomas Mantell the first military pilot downed by a UFO? Now, after nearly 50 years of silence, the air traffic controller who heard it all tells the incredible story the Air Force refuses to admit.
He said, well, now he's trying to move away. I'm going to close in for a better look. And that's the last thing he ever said.
Then, this psychic offers investigators new clues to the identity of a killer who brutally murdered a Colorado trucker.
Well, the first thing I can tell you is he's already killed 5 people when this photo was taken.
Later, is there an evil force that won't let this mother and her 2-year-old daughter leave their home?
If my daughter tries to move and take the baby, she's going to become violent.
And dramatic physical evidence of an Israeli close encounter.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. No one knows exactly what Thomas Mantell was chasing the day his P-51 fighter plane crashed in Franklin, Kentucky. For nearly 50 years, his family has searched for the truth, and Sightings has tried to help. First, by uncovering wreckage from Mantell's plane, and now by introducing his children to the man who heard Tommy's very last words. Carla Wohl reports.
On D-Day, June 6, 1944, Captain Thomas Mantell Jr. proved just what kind of a pilot he was. He received the Silver Star and Flying Cross for heroism and extraordinary achievement in flight after he successfully towed a spy glider across enemy lines. After the war, he opened up his own flight school and served in the Kentucky Air National Guard. He was a devoted husband, a loving father, and the first confirmed casualty of a military UFO confrontation. The identity of that UFO has never been revealed, and the family that Tommy Mantell left behind still have nagging questions that prolong their grief.
The Air Force has been absolutely no help at all. They have told us absolutely nothing. They sent nobody out to talk to my mother when this happened. It may have been 48 years ago, you know, but not knowing still hurts.
The day Tommy died, January 7th, 1948, the air traffic controller at Godman Field was Quentin Blackwell, the man who heard Captain Mantell's last words. Now, after 48 years, Tommy's sister Betty and his 2 sons, Terry and Thomas III, are going to meet Quentin Blackwell for the first time.
It's been almost 50 years since your father was killed. What are you hoping that Quentin Blackwell will tell you?
Just to hear the last, what he said in his last words, since he was the last person to talk to my dad.
What I hope Mr. Blackwell will clear up in my mind is if Mr. Blackwell happened to see the object that he was pursuing, or if he could shed any light on what it was.
All along, due to the cover-up, I felt like either they knew what it was and didn't want to tell us, or they didn't know what it was and they didn't want the world to know. And I would kind of like to know which of those things maybe it was.
Blackwell has never spoken publicly about the incident, but nearly 50 years later, he's still troubled by his memories. It was his son, Jackie, who convinced Blackwell to break the Air Force-imposed gag order after seeing the Mantells on Sightings.
To me, it was a family's appeal. They asked for anybody that had any information surrounding this incident, if they could talk to the families, and to me, that was enough, and I just had to talk to my dad and say, look, do you want to? And Dad says, yeah, I'll talk to the family.
On January 7th, 1948, Mantell was part of a team ferrying P-51 fighters from Georgia to his home base in Kentucky. Near Godman Field, Fort Knox, the tower asked the team to investigate reports of a strange, unidentified flying object. The planes were not equipped for high altitude, and all but Tommy turned back at 25,000 feet. Tommy pursued the UFO and described a large metallic object. 33,000 feet, his plane heeled over and came down in a spin. It crashed and burned in a Kentucky field. The Air Force said Tommy blacked out from lack of oxygen while mistakenly chasing an experimental balloon. But in Tulsa, at Quentin Blackwell's home, the Mantels heard a much different story from a key eyewitness.
I got to the tower and I looked out there and there was that saucer, boy. So I called the base operations officer from downstairs, a major, and he came up. He said, "You got me in trouble now. I've got to call the base commander." So he called over to Fort Knox and have some of the generals come over.
During our conversation, Blackwell confirmed many of the family's suspicions and also provided new information about the real reason why the other P-51s decided to turn back.
Abruptly, he said, "Godman Tower, my two wingmen are coming in. We want hot guns, and we want them now."
Hot guns is Air Force slang for loading live ammunition into aircraft artillery. A National Guard wing commander like Mantell could only order weapons to be loaded when there's a verifiable threat and with permission from his superiors. So if Mantell instructed his wingman to load his guns, then someone else had to have seen the threat also.
How did he describe the object?
He said it was about 200 feet across, probably 70, 75 feet thick. It has observation windows in the top section around. He moved around it again, and he said it's metallic, dull aluminum color. And he said, "Well, now it's trying to move away. I'm going to close in for a better look." And that's the last thing he ever said.
The Air Force speculated that Mantell was suffering hallucinations caused by anoxia, the medical term for lack of oxygen.
Was Captain Mantell coherent when he was talking to you?
In my opinion, he had control right on through. I have worked people with anoxia, and in my opinion, he wasn't suffering. He was in full command of his facility.
Perhaps the most important information Blackwell revealed were the names and ranks of other eyewitnesses in the tower.
Oh, mercy. There was about 3 generals, colonels carrying coffee, the base commander, Colonel Hicks, and the operations officer. It was jammed. When they said he was down, everybody abruptly left because the red tape gets awful. They didn't want to write all the reports, and didn't want to say they'd seen a saucer, didn't want to say they hadn't seen a saucer.
He was definitely chasing something that he felt was of a national...
Well, I think it more or less makes him a hero.
Quentin Blackwell's revelations were a double-edged sword for the family who had traveled so far to meet him. He confirmed their worst fears, that the Air Force knew that Tommy was after more than a balloon and still chose to remain silent. But Blackwell also spoke out about Mantell's heroism, something his family had always known in their hearts.
Thomas Mantell is one of the most famous names in the history of ufology. But his family hopes that people will remember Tommy not just because he chased a UFO, but because he laid his life on the line to protect America from whatever he saw up there.
This is definitely not where he was killed.
Next, 2 psychics attempt to catch a murderer. Later, another mysterious crop circle, this time in Australia.
The laws in this country protect the innocent, but sometimes they also allow a guilty person to go free. When there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge the man police think killed Gregory Stone, his parents turned to a psychic detective for help. They're hoping for a paranormal break in the case.
There's no parents in the world that had a nicer son than we did. And no parents any place could have loved their son more than we did.
He was an outdoorsman. He liked to bow hunt and he liked to fish, and he was always in a good mood and happy, and he was always joking around with everybody.
Words of love for Gregory Scott Stone. Scott to his friends and family. A man who had served his country and was devoted to his 2 little girls. Scott made his living as a long-distance trucker, and it was during one cross-country run just before Thanksgiving, 1992, that Scott's life took a horrible, wrong turn. The mystery surrounding that day has haunted his family ever since.
He called me from Kansas, and we were planning for him to come to Grand Junction to have Thanksgiving with us.
Early on the morning of November 24th, Scott called his girlfriend, Sandra Harned, to tell her that a bad snowstorm would delay his arrival at her home. It was the last time Sandra would hear Scott's voice.
The next day, on Thanksgiving, he didn't show up, and he didn't call.
Scott wasn't the type to just disappear, and when police discovered blood inside his empty rig, his parents feared the worst.
We found out that his tractor had been abandoned in Colorado and it had blood in it. We knew that something had happened to Scott.
For 6 months, Scott's family tried to keep hope alive.
We kept praying that something would happen, that he would call. No matter how many times you'd call his name, he would never answer us because he's laying out there dead in Colorado and we didn't know it.
Scott Stone's body was found wrapped in one of his own moving blankets in a dry creek bed just outside Denver, Colorado. He had been shot with the same gun he kept in his cab for protection.
We figured that he was killed in the truck where the blood was, and he was hauled in the truck out in the country and dumped off alongside the road like a dead dog or something.
It seems this affable trucker with friends all around the country also had an enemy. And his loved ones and the Adams County Sheriff think they know who it is.
I have a good idea on who it might be.
We have a suspect in mind.
Detective John Williams has been working on the Stone case since 1992. His first break came when an associate of Scott's was arrested for shoplifting in Albuquerque. Williams questioned the man about Scott's death, but he insisted that he had last seen Scott in Missouri 2 weeks before Thanksgiving and had no idea he had been murdered. But a witness in Kansas told the family he had seen the two men together just days before Thanksgiving. Then, in a Denver pawn shop, police found CDs and a CD player, and a witness who said Scott's associate had pawned them.
The family had previously told me that Greg Stone owned those items, and that would have been 2 days after Greg Stone was last heard from in Hays, Kansas.
But despite these promising leads, there was not enough hard evidence to issue a warrant, and the suspect was released. To jumpstart the stalled investigation, Sightings offered assistance from two world-renowned psychic detectives, Nancy Meyer and Kathleen Ray. Each worked from a different location, Meyer traveling to the scene of the crime to formulate her theories, Ray working from her California home, using photographs of Scott to develop her psychic impressions. In both cases, the family hopes they can provide new information that brings the killer in.
When you're desperate for justice to be served after something this traumatic to have happened, you are willing to do just about anything.
In Denver, Nancy Meyer met with the lead detectives to view crime scene photographs.
These are some of the photos that were taken the night the body was recovered.
I can tell you one thing right off the bat, this is definitely not where he was killed.
Can you tell anything about who the person is that he's talking with?
Yeah, he's talking with a man. It's sort of almost an argument, but not quite an argument.
Can you hear what they're saying?
They're having a discussion about money.
Detectives showed Meyer a photo of Scott's associate, but did not tell her he was a suspect.
Well, the first thing I can tell you is he's already killed 5 people when this photo was taken.
In San Jose, Kathleen Ray was receiving almost identical psychic impressions.
I don't feel like this is the first person he's killed. I would have to say that there are several others.
Meyer and Ray, independent of one another and more than 1,000 miles apart, both zero in on the same man as the killer.
It's almost like he gets caught for the little stuff. He steals stuff, and he likes to keep moving around.
And later, at the location where Scott's body was found, Meyer begins to sense a motive.
The murder itself may have just been a result of the argument with this man.
I do feel that Gregory Scott had told him, I feel very strongly the impulse to say, get out. That's it, get out. Get away, I don't want you anymore. I don't want you around me anymore.
I know that they didn't get along very well.
It was a pretty well-known fact that they weren't getting along, even from the suspect when the Denver Police Department talked to him, that they weren't getting along, and they hadn't been for quite some time. So I think it came to a head finally, and Greg Stone was murdered.
And then Meyer sees a crack in the suspect's shield.
The killer has bragged about this killing. He has bragged about it when he's been drinking. He has bragged a couple times about that.
Finding who he bragged to will be as important as finding the suspect.
One thing that could be helpful is to go back and try to look at the suspect, see if he does have any family members, and go back and try to locate them if they do exist, and see if the suspect has mentioned anything to him about what's been happening.
But Meyer believes it will be a sightings viewer who will play a significant role in breaking this case.
I think you're going to get 2 contacts after this is aired that will give you some pretty precise information. One in particular, and I think it's a woman that's going to break the case because she's tired of living in fear.
If anyone knows anything about this, they need to come forward and tell us what they know and get this person behind bars, because he's out there walking around and our son is dead, and our son should not be dead.
The police are now following up on the new leads provided by Nancy Meyer and Kathleen Ray. If you have any information that might be relevant to the investigation, please contact the Sheriff's Department in Adams County, Colorado.
Next, why alien sightings are increasing on TV. Australia's first crop circle. And extinction in the name of medicine.
Here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. Ufologists aren't the only ones who appreciate the powerful attraction of UFOs and extraterrestrials. Madison Avenue also wants the Force to be with us. In New York City, homemade low-budget UFO paraphernalia is being replaced with high-tech. Millions of dollars are being spent to bring extraterrestrials into the mainstream. And the Manhattan creator of this advertising trend says his work is simply a reflection of America's growing acceptance of UFOs.
I think good advertising, great advertising, holds a mirror up to the goings-on in America and really shows it as it is. And so this commercial was the perfect one to let us do that.
Not only did this commercial increase product sales, it also spawned countless imitators. Today, there are aliens selling cars, airlines, beverages, and sporting goods. It's a trend that some say may be subliminally preparing us for inevitable real-life encounters.
Until people actually do see extraterrestrials, be it on television or walking down the street, they will always be interested because we really don't know what's out there.
In Ashland, Oregon, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is urgently warning that some of the world's most endangered species are now being hunted to extinction to feed a booming demand for traditional Asian medicines. And we warn you, the pictures are disturbing.
There's such a huge potential market in Asia alone, not to mention our own resident Asian communities, in using these traditional medicines. And what that means is the tigers, the rhinos, the bears are suddenly under intense pressure.
Worldwide, the wildlife slaughter is now a nearly $4 billion a year industry, with tigers facing the worst threat. And to keep up with demand, the animal butchers are also defrauding consumers. Analysts found that all these medicines claiming to contain tiger parts in fact contain none. These so-called rhino horn capsules instead contain high levels of arsenic, and this tiger paw is actually a painted cow hoof.
The problem with all of these products is that they maintain the demand for endangered species, even though they do not contain the real items.
Experts believe that all of these creatures would be less endangered if only doctors would take serious steps toward demystifying the curative powers of these rare and noble animals. From Adelaide, Australia, pictures of the first unexplained crop circle ever found on this continent. The strange pattern in a suburban wheat field was first discovered by an airline passenger.
I just looked down at this field and I said to myself, that's a crop circle, because I've seen pictures of them in England, these crop circles, and it just looked exactly the same.
Measuring 50 feet across, the crop circle has no apparent signs of human intervention, a fact that ufologist Colin Norris sees as an indication of the circle's link to an extraterrestrial visit.
To be as so fine in itself, the quality, the markings, the whole thing, it just could not be done by normal human people.
Norris believes that the Adelaide crop circle is only the latest in a string of Australian UFO activity going back more than a decade.
So, you know, we add the whole lot up. So how can we keep burying our heads in the sand and being so indifferent to the facts and the reality of the UFO phenomenon?
We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
Something evil is terrorizing this New Jersey mother and her 2-year-old daughter.
When I heard the voices, I just said, he's not taking my baby anywhere. And my reaction was to just keep her away from the house.
Later, a rare interview with sci-fi master Arthur C. Clarke.
In the early 1960s, a Latvian scientist named Konstantin Raudive recorded strange, ghostly voices on an otherwise blank audio tape. It was the beginning of a new era in ghost research, a blending of the psychological and the scientific. Today, the field of electronic voice phenomenon, which Raudive pioneered, is recording some of the best evidence to date of voices from beyond. Inside this modest New Jersey home, there is an unwanted presence. A poltergeist that arrived without warning after the birth of Tony Adams' granddaughter, Alyssa. It is an otherworldly force that Tony and her daughter Yolanda believe is using the baby as a conduit to this world.
Some of the first things that happened would be the coffee pot lifted off the coffee maker and went across the counter and smacked down on the counter. Doors slamming, footsteps up and down the stairs were pretty consistent.
And then, mother and daughter began to see the first signs that the activity was connected to baby Alyssa.
She was about a year old, and she would start having conversations, like, mostly gibberish, you know, but she would say, like, a name.
She would look up at the TV and say, "Don't do that," and then the TV would go off, and I knew that she was talking to someone.
Sometimes she would be frightened, or sometimes she would just, you know, want to go to it. And I thought it was kind of weird. I thought she was a little too young to have imaginary friends.
I would say, "Alyssa, who are you talking to?" She'd say, "Bobby." And I'd say, "Where is Bobby?" And then she would point to him.
She would say, "Susie. Susie's coming," you know? And Bobby's bad.
When she got frightened by Bobby, she would call Susie and want to go to her.
I was home alone with Alyssa, and we were standing in the kitchen, and she got really scared, and she was holding on tight to me, and I felt a coldness surrounding me. And I asked her what was wrong, and she just kept looking like she was really scared.
The paranormal visits intensified, and Tony also saw a manifestation of the haunting.
There was a white mass, almost like a cloud, that seemed to be taller than I was, and it seemed to go right through me. I was very scared at that point.
Her fear seemed justified when the haunting took a dangerous turn for the worse.
The stove would turn on, the flames would go up really high. I went into the bathroom, and the trash can was on fire. I tried to leave the house, and I couldn't leave. It's like there was something pushing me back into the house.
Tony's family and friends tried to help, but when Felicia Sigulski brought holy water into the house, it only seemed to enrage the forces and draw them out.
That's when it really hit me. It was really strong. It just sent like electricity starting from my
ends of my fingertips all the way up my arms. He had knocked the holy water across the floor, and as if to symbolize, I don't like this. Don't bring this here again.
That was when Tony decided to contact Al Rober, who's been investigating paranormal phenomena for more than 25 years.
As far as all my investigations in the past, and I've been on quite a few investigations, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say this is probably a 9.
In an attempt to confirm the existence of entities here, Rober begins his investigation with an EVP session.
An electronic voice phenomena is the imprinting of sounds, or usually voices, onto a recording tape, where you can't audibly hear these sounds while you're there. But then when you play the tape back, somehow these voices are imprinted on the tape. You need to talk to us.
During the recording session, Rober challenged the entity to manifest itself.
All right, we're going to be addressing the gentleman who's been, for some reason, annoying his family. And what we want to know is, why are you doing this?
No anomalous sounds were heard during the recording session, but when the tape was played back, Rober made an amazing discovery.
At one point on the tape, as if in answer to my challenge, you can hear the female, who's the warning entity, warning us, saying he's coming upstairs. And just before the voice is on the tape, you can actually hear footsteps, as if somebody's actually walking up steps.
Tony believes that this female voice may be Susie, one of the entities who speaks through baby Alyssa.
Well, a short time later, we hear him on the tape when I'm asking about someone moving out of the house. I hear him saying the baby is staying, as if he's demanding that. The baby is staying.
Are you upset that Amanda's leaving?
Listen again to this remarkable EVP recording of a man's voice saying, "The baby is staying." And this voice, the family believes, is Bobby, the male entity who communicates with Alyssa.
Why does he want the baby to stay? Because that's his communication link. That's his connection. The baby is perceiving him.
When I heard the voices, I just said, he's not taking my baby anywhere, you know. I was scared. My reaction was to just keep her away from the house.
The male voice was frightening. It was almost demonic sounding.
I'm concerned because I think he may not want her to leave this house. He's not aware that he can actually hurt her, and probably physically he can't by himself. But she sleepwalks and she'll follow him in her sleep, which could lead to her falling downstairs or something like that.
The only thing that worries me is that if my daughter tries to move and take the baby, that he's going to become violent. Because at one point he was moving the furniture, knocking things over when we had mentioned about her moving out.
Sightings sought a second opinion on the EVP recording and sent a copy of Rober's tape to Bart Ellis, an EVP analyst since 1970.
From all the recordings that I've listened to for the past 20 years, it certainly sounds to me like a genuine paranormal voice.
Ellis analyzed the recording with special equipment he's developed.
What differentiates a paranormal EVP voice from a natural voice is that they will respond to a question that you ask. They will talk to you about something that you have recently done. They will give you information that is very personal.
To determine why Bobby and Susie were haunting this home, Rober asked psychic Jane Doherty for her psychic impressions. She had sensed that the home had once been a barn and that a man named Bobby died here in an accidental fire.
There is definitely a fire motif that is going on. That is what my concern was. I think of all the cases I've worked on, this was the most frightening in many aspects, because you have the poltergeist aspect and you have some real danger going on, or the real possibility of danger because of the fire and the child.
And it was during our interview with Yolanda that Bobby seemed to make his presence known to the sightings team.
Where is he? Is he here?
Bobby's here.
Bobby's here?
Yeah.
Well, where does Bobby stay?
I should stay at the house.
He stays in the house?
Yeah.
It's very exciting getting the voices on tape, but even as a researcher, I would give it up if we could get this house quiet.
If there were one question I could ask the spirit, I would say, what would you like us to do? How can we help you? If there's some reason they can't go back, we'd like to help so that we can all live calmly again.
After our initial investigation, the haunting activity inside the home intensified. Sightings has asked paranormal investigator Al Robert to conduct a scientific assessment of the property and psychic Diana Abbott to try to make contact with a haunting entity. Their findings on an upcoming edition of Sightings.
Next, experts agree. Writers like Arthur C. Clarke did more than just imagine the future.
They didn't predict it, they shaped it. They actually made it so.
"50 years ago, a young science fiction writer sat at his desk in London and dreamed about the future. He envisioned synchronous orbit satellite communication and the emergence of artificial intelligence. Everything he saw would eventually come to pass. Today, Arthur C. Clarke is 78. He lives in Sri Lanka, and he is still dreaming. With the film release of 2001, A Space Odyssey in 1968, a worldwide audience learned of the genius of a writer, philosopher, and scientist named Arthur C. Clarke. This extraordinary work of science fiction offered not only a great story filled with human and inhuman emotion, but also predicted the future with an accuracy we are only beginning to appreciate today. And at 78, Clarke is still looking forward and remains one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. Clarke's home today is the tiny island nation of Sri Lanka. Here, he researches and writes about the future, continuing to work from a scientific perspective, as he has since his earliest career in the British military.
At the time, I was working on microwave radar, the first GCA, ground-controlled equipment. So, I was dealing with that technology.
By day, Clarke worked on the top-secret radar program that would eventually help win a war. By night, he pushed the envelope, envisioning where this new technology could lead. He saw radar and rockets merging, creating a reason for governments to fund his ultimate dream of human space travel.
I said, well, in what way can rockets be used to make some money to pay for spaceships, you see? So I put the two ideas together. Using rockets to launch satellites, the use of satellites to act as relay stations for television. I wrote it up in summer of '45, and it was published exactly 50 years ago.
Clarke's paper detailed the very system of space satellites that are in use today. Remarkable, because at the time, rockets were extremely primitive, and television was still in its earliest experimental stages.
He wrote about it first as a science article, a proposal, a serious proposal, which is where it belonged, of course, since it was perfectly obvious, as long as you were brilliant enough to think of it.
But my contribution was to point out that the solution to the problem of long-distance TV was not to build hundreds of towers, each at, a few hundred miles apart, or to have floating towers across the Atlantic, which had been suggested, but to go to the satellite orbit. It has changed the world, there's no doubt of that, but I can't claim too much credit, because if I hadn't published that paper in October '45, about 10 of my friends would have done so within a year.
Humility aside, he was the first. And after that illustrious beginning and his discharge from the military, Clarke devoted himself full-time to his two great loves, science and fiction.
He's one of the first writers that I remember reading when I was about 14 years old. I read Childhood's End, and I walked away from that just stunned. I had an intellectual high from it.
And that early influence had a hand in shaping the future.
Arthur is one of the major pioneers of the notion of spaceflight, what it should be, how it should be conducted. He wrote early novels of spaceflight, which, while they seem kind of out of date today, were seminal at the time because they influenced the people who were actually building the rocket ships.
Arthur C. Clarke's influence became paramount with his masterpiece 2001, A Space Odyssey. Although it was a work of fiction, Clark and his partner, director Stanley Kubrick, worked hard to develop its realism.
This was in 1964 when the Apollo program had been announced, but no one really believed we would go to the moon. So anyway, we were writing the film before we had any close-ups of the moon's surface, so we had to guess what it might be like. And there were all sorts of problems. I think we did pretty well. One or two mistakes. For instance, we show the moon is more rugged.
Despite these topographical errors, 2001 changed the way the world looked at space. Now, nearly 30 years later, it's easy to see why Clark is called a modern-day prophet.
Yes, but accidental prophets. This is the way the future will be.
Our prophets are more straightforward artists. They really put down the dreams in a way that's evocative, and sometimes they influence the way the future looks. So a film like 2001 actually influences the way spaceships are designed. And then people look back and go, well, how marvelous, they predicted it. No, they didn't predict it, they shaped it. They actually made it so.
2001's impact on space travel may be apparent, but the main theme of the film has not yet become so. Extraterrestrial contact via a strange electronic signal emanating from outer space.
I think it's quite possible that there has been contact, but unless we do some more exploring and research, we won't know.
When the U.S. government started Project SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, Clark was one of its staunchest supporters. He believes that if an alien civilization exists, we will learn of them through radio waves.
In this case, we're not only searching the radio spectrum, but we're searching the whole sphere of the sky. So even if we had thousands of receivers listening, it might take centuries before we hear anything. On the other hand, we might get a result tomorrow.
While extraterrestrial contact has yet to occur, it is all that is missing from Arthur C. Clarke's near-perfect vision of the future. Among Arthur C. Clarke's other endeavors is Project Phoenix. When the U.S. government canceled funding for SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, Clarke stepped in to help create Project Phoenix. It's a privately funded research program searching for evidence of extraterrestrial communication.
Next, hot on the tracks of an Israeli UFO.
The tracker was amazed to find an 8-kilometer trail. He says he never saw such tracks before.
UFO sightings are continuing in the Holy Land. Recently, we heard from one of Israel's leading UFO researchers, Doron Rotem, about new sightings of a mysterious craft and contact with a large alien being in the small village of Yatzitz in central Israel. In this Holy Land, on this ancient soil, people with polar views struggle to coexist because this is the birthplace of three great world religions. And that is why, ufologists tell us, it is perhaps destined that alien visitors would choose this place as their Mecca too. During the spring of 1993, in Kadima, Israel, a small coastal town between Tel Aviv and Haifa, three women, unknown to each other, all reported similar alien visitations.
He was very tall. He was almost 3 meters tall.
He was a giant, very tall, with big eyes. His face was more oval-shaped. His eyes were shiny like a spotlight, glittering.
And all around, there were as if flickering lights, like that.
Before I could move, he disappeared.
Each of these encounters occurred on a Saturday, the Jewish Sabbath, and at the same exact time and in the same exact manner. And in each case, strange circles were left behind after the encounter.
The grass became, within a day, completely dry. It was before high as this grass all around. Became completely dry, and eventually, after 2 or 3 days, lay down just like the way it's here.
Most recently, 2 years after the Kadima visits, the otherwise quiet town of Yatzitz is suddenly in a panic after village leader Herzl Cosentini reports a frightening encounter with an alien being. It is Friday evening at the beginning of the Jewish Sabbath.
I was visiting a friend whose name is Danny Azar. I was at his place at around 8:30. About 9:30, something passed by the house that caused shaking. It rattled the windows and doors. I was curious to find out what happened, so I opened the door. I saw something very strange. I was very scared by it. As soon as my friend saw it, he fell down because he was so scared.
And they didn't try to follow it. What they do is lock themselves in the room and call the police.
Doran Rotem is a horticulturist by trade, but for 20 years, he has also been one of Israel's most respected UFO investigators. Rotem interviewed Herzl and Danny the morning after their encounter. He discovered that the men reported a creature very similar to that reported by the women of Kadima.
The tracker was amazed to find an 8-kilometer trail to the nearest village. He says he never saw such tracks before. And he claimed that any animal on an 8-kilometer trail would leave at least some feces on the ground, which never was found.
By measuring the distance between the unidentifiable footprints, investigators have estimated its stride to be approximately 50 inches, more than twice the length of an average human stride.
It has a huge front track that stuck into the ground to 35 centimeters, and then after it stuck, a little feminine heel appeared in the back. It doesn't find on humans, it doesn't find on animals, so it indicates that there was something else over there.
Herzl Kosen
is sparked, and I would be interested in taking a look at what it's all about. We were raising cows once, horses. We've seen everything. A thing like this, it's not a thing you see every day.
This is the plaster cast of one of the Yahtseet's footprints. For now, it's all the UFO researchers have to go on, because since Herzl Constantini's sighting, the creature has vanished.
Ghosts, UFOs, the unexplained, dramatic stories of the paranormal from the files of Sightings, a new paperback book available now wherever books are sold, from Fireside Books.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.